So my wife Allison and I were in the truck driving back from St. Johnsbury. It was one of those nice warm summer nights where it was still bright outside and things were feeling great. The weather was perfect. We had just gone into town to have supper, and we were just driving back home. We took the long way, we took the back roads way to get there. But all of a sudden, as we were driving down this one road, I suddenly saw something that caught my eye, and I stopped the truck. There, right in the middle of the road, were 3 little baby raccoons acting really freaked out and really scared and not quite sure what to do. These little guys were adorable, but they were totally freaked out. I slowly started to approach them. I figured that the first order of business was to try to shepherd them out of the road and get them off to the side. I didn't want a car to just come whizzing through there and make them roadkill. But as I approached them, they didn't seem to move away. This fact really freaked out Allison, and she started yelling at me,
"Be careful, they're gonna have rabies. What are you doing?"
But between my yelling back to Allison and Allison yelling at me, that noise and commotion seemed to scare the raccoons off to the curb. And so they seemed somewhat out of danger. Allison was really worried. It was daylight, they were acting weird. She had strong concerns of rabies. I gotta say, I think she kind of had a point, but I felt like I needed to take some action here. Whew, I am sweating like a hog. It's actually kind of ironic that I was going through any effort whatsoever to try to save these raccoons. Over the last 6 or 7 months or so at our farm, I've had quite an issue with raccoons. Over the winter, we had a family of raccoons actually living inside the barn, and they were creating a ton of havoc. They were getting into our garbage cans, they were getting into our compost cans, they were trying to get into the duck feed. All in all, they were making quite the mess. They found our big empty barn to be the perfect spot to set up shop for the winter. I tried to do some things like make sure that my compost wasn't accessible and really lock it down and even hang it like it was like I was trying to prevent bears while camping. And that kind of worked, but the raccoons were still lingering. These raccoons, they were a real problem for me because they had set up the barn as home for themselves. They were going to use that barn for as long as they were allowed to. I brewed the ducklings and the goslings inside that same barn. And if a raccoon got into the brooder room, it could have a field day and just rip those little fuzzy, fluffy birds apart.
We're talking about unchecked aggression here.
As you guys who've watched my channel might know, I've historically never been all that good at trapping animals. This past spring, I was dealing with a mink that was preying on the ducks. And as I set out to try to catch that mink, all I did was waste my time and end up catching a skunk. So at first I'd opted to use have-a-heart traps to catch these raccoons, and that didn't work at all. It was completely a miserable failure. The raccoons just seemed to think that, oh, this is a great convenient way to get access to food. They were even dragging the have-a-heart trap around to different parts of our barn, like taking it with them, like the food was in a to-go container. It was flippin' ridiculous. I got a little wily coyote and decided to make like a plank trap. Like what I tried to do was I put a plank out and put some peanut butter at one end of the plank and a rock to balance it out on the other end. But I put like a garbage can down below that. And the idea would be that the raccoon would walk to the edge of the plank and then it would tip over and it would drop into the cold water that I had at the bottom of that garbage can. That idea was an abject failure. And then I decided to try to test my luck with one of these things. It's what's known as a dog-proof snap trap, I think, or something along those lines. So the way it works is you basically clamp it up and you hook the dog just sort of like this. Wait, hold on, let me just get this just so. And so then the way it works is the raccoon will take its little paw and jam it in here to get the peanut butter, and then wham. This bar clamps, and then the raccoon's wrist is caught in here, and then you have a raccoon trapped by the paw in this trap.
Data, what are you doing?
I am stuck.
So the first night that I used this trap, I set it out around 6:15, 6:30, in the winter time around here, it's pitch dark at that point. I brought the cats inside to make sure that they would be safe. And around, I don't know, 7:45, 8 o'clock, I went outside to check the trap, and bam, right inside there was a gigantic raccoon with his paw jammed in here, just looking at me. And I will admit it, looking at that raccoon and staring that creature right in the eyes and seeing it look back at me, I kind of felt a little bit heartbroken. I mean, this is another living creature, a mammal, that is feeling pain. It's trapped in this trap, and it's scared. And part of me, for a moment, like a really brief moment, contemplated the idea of undoing the trap somehow without the creature biting me, which I have no idea how that would happen, and let it go free. But I know that that wouldn't be a solution. I mean, even if I let that creature go free, it would probably still remain in the barn, and all the problems I would still have would exist, and my animals would be at risk, and our trash would be strewn everywhere, and it wasn't gonna work out. Where we live here in Vermont's Northeast Kingdom is a relatively wild area. And you know, there's a lot of animals, there's a lot of wildlife. I mean, as I walk around here, I find all sorts of things. Hey, would you look at that? All right, see this? This was an ear of corn that was probably found by an animal, I'm guessing either a bear or a raccoon, in one of my neighbor's cornfields. And they probably dragged it out to the cedar swamp here to have a little feast. So I feel very strongly that this type of situation means that I need to strike a balance with how I live with nature. On one end, I can't be out there trying to disrupt it too much, but on the other hand, I need to really balance things out, and I can't let nature run wild over me and my homestead. So I made the responsible decision, and I walked back inside the house, got my gun, and dispatched of the raccoon. You know, that night, I don't think I could actually sleep. I woke up several times with nightmares. Like, I had a nightmare that I killed one of the barn cats. I had a nightmare that the raccoon was still alive, but shot in the barn and suffering. And it was just awful, unrestful sleep. I've hunted a little bit before, and I've killed livestock before for harvesting for meat. But until that night, I'd never killed an animal in a trap like that. And it was kind of a jarring experience for me. So over the course of the next 2 nights, I set the trap 2 more times, and I caught 2 more raccoons. I dispatched of each one of them the same way. I mean, these raccoons were big, healthy beasts. They had definitely been living high on the hog inside our barn. I gave the first raccoon, who was the biggest raccoon, to my friend Zia. She's really into taxidermy, and she wanted to use it. The second raccoon I ended up keeping for myself, and I tried to skin it myself. I wanted to maybe experiment with eating the meat and maybe try to save and preserve the pelt, but I made a complete mess of the carcass, and it ended up being somewhat of a waste. And for that third raccoon, I ended up actually just tossing it out here amongst the cedar swamp and letting it be a feast for other wild creatures, trying to, you know, return it all to nature. And by the time I dispatched that third raccoon, I guess I kind of found a peace with it all. Felt like this was just the order of things and the way it had to be. No bad nightmares after that. Everything was fine. Things got back to normal on the farm. Until that moment when I was standing there in front of those 3 little baby raccoons in the middle of the street in St. Johnsbury. I mean, their mother should have been with them. I had no idea why their mother wasn't there. Maybe she got killed by a hunter or hit by a car. We were right along the banks of the Connecticut River, so maybe something happened over there. I just don't know what happened. I felt like I owed those little baby raccoons something, and I had to do something about the situation. So I called up animal control and told them where I was, and I told them about the situation. I explained that there were 3 baby raccoons in the middle of the road. They were acting erratic. There was no adult present, and was wondering if they would come and do something. And the lady who was working dispatch just kind of chuckled at me and said, "Nah, there's nothing we can do about that. Just let it go." And so I did. I let it go. I shooed the little baby raccoons towards a tree. They seemed like they were generally safe. I don't even know what's happened to them now. I've driven by that spot maybe 3 times and haven't seen any trace of them. I hope they're okay. Maybe they're growing up. Hopefully they found their mother again. But I'm also aware that those 3 baby raccoons could probably be dead by this point. It's tough for little ones to survive without their mother. But I probably should stop yakking and get back to work. I got some firewood to chop up out here. because even though it's like 95 degrees right now in summer, winter will be coming. Thanks, guys.